Alright, I know I might be asking too much, but are we ready to have a nuanced conversation on the internet? About a year ago, I read Blood at the Root, a debut novel that went viral on Book Talk for having the magic and wonder of Harry Potter while taking place at an HBCU. The author talked a lot about how he was inspired by these iconic book series and how he wanted to create something similar with a black boy as the main character. His goal was to give them the representation that he didn't necessarily have growing up, and to show them that they too could be the heroes of their own stories, which is what immediately drew me to the book. I was under the impression that this story would focus on Black Boy Joy and wouldn't necessarily center on trauma. Specifically, in a lot of his promotional videos on TikTok, the author said that this wasn't just going to be a story about police brutality. Again, all of these things really spoke to me as a reader, and as soon as it was available at my local library, I put in a request for the book. So when I finally received my audiobook hold on Libby, I was so excited to read it, but very quickly, it started to go downhill. You can watch the review I made last year, but essentially, when I read the book, I noticed some red flags. Specifically, with the way the main character was interacting with other women in the story, queer folk, and other marginalized communities. I was concerned that the book was leaning into misogyny by mistreating and misrepresenting the female characters, essentially resigning even the most strong and independent of women to shallow supporting character roles. There were a few jokes that I found to be at the expense of queer people, and even aside from what I found morally wrong, I just didn't enjoy the world building or the plot. Now, I did rate the book 1 star, but at the end of my video, I said that I would be open to continuing the series. And it was this part of the video that would eventually come back to haunt me. In July of this year, the sequel, Bones at the Crossroads, was published, and I announced on my social media that I was in fact reading the book. I recorded a TikTok when I started the book addressing some of the concerns that I had right off the bat, and I got a lot of comments on that video asking me why I would continue a series when I very obviously didn't like the first book. And this was a comment that I had received before, especially when I reviewed the third book in the Powerless series. And I wanted to address some of the reasons why I might decide to continue a series when I don't have a good impression on the first book. Reason number 1, morbid curiosity. Reason number 2, free will. And reason number 3, which I'm sure people will get immense gratification from hearing me say out loud, sometimes I am in fact wrong. Sometimes my initial impression on a story that is incomplete can change once I'm given more context. And sometimes I simply change my mind. So after reading Bones at the Crossroads, I am here to tell you that my thoughts on the series have in fact changed. Dare I say that this book is a drastic improvement from book 1. So without further ado, hello. Welcome back. It is a new day, a new sleigh, and a new video where I have something to say, and today I'm going to be talking about Bones at the Crossroads. I will start with a brief summary of book 1 and 2. Book 1 is Blood at the Root, which is the first in a trilogy. It follows Malik Barron, a 17-year-old boy from Helena, Alabama, who ever since his mother died on the 4th of July has discovered that he has magical abilities. But for the past 10 or so years, he has had to hide his powers. Eventually, he and his foster brother Tay are found by his long-lost grandmother, Mama Aya. She sends Malik to a magical HBCU called Cayman University. There, he learns to hone his abilities and even runs into his childhood crush, Alexis. In the background, there is also a mystery surrounding some missing students. Now, spoilers for book 1, if you want to read that before getting into this video, I suggest you click off the video now. Essentially, book 1 ends with Alexis betraying Malik and joining an evil group of magical people known as the BATR, and his mom, surprise, she's not actually dead, she gets released from a magical prison because she is also evil. Now, book 2, Bones at the Crossroads. This picks up in the fall semester of his freshman year at Cayman University. So really, only a couple months has passed. Malik is still 17 years old. But in light of everything that he experienced over the summer session, he's deciding to devote himself to his studies. He's grieving the loss of Alexis, who is still alive, but again, she betrayed him, while he's simultaneously fighting his new growing feelings for a different girl named Dominique. The governing body of the magical world, which I honestly don't know if that's a true statement, statement. I never really got a clear understanding of what they do. Anyway, not the point. The Khoisan tribe, as they're called, is desperately trying to cover up the return of the BOCOR. People are already freaking out because kids are going missing, so they don't want to make it worse by letting them know that the equivalent of the Death Eaters are back. So this book follows a few different storylines. The first storyline is Malik trying to figure out a way to keep his mom from infiltrating the campus. The second storyline is Malik growing his own magical powers and understanding how to use them. That storyline also centers around a mentorship where he essentially joins the magical NHS National Honor Society. And the third storyline is around the Cayman homecoming dance and the conflicts between him and his friends. Now, this might be a controversial statement, but I do think that the book is really long. The audiobook is a full 19 hours, 4 hours longer than book one. I always get a lot of flack for saying that a book is long, but almost 20 hours is objectively long. That's not a negative or a positive statement, it's an observation. And the only reason I bring it up is because since there's a lot of storylines, it's a lot to cover, which contributes to the length. And the hardest part about having a book that is just generally longer is trying to maintain the flow of the plot. Trying to follow a lot of different storylines in one book is already hard enough, but it just gets further exacerbated when you have to keep track of everything over a longer period of time. Anyway, before I get too off topic, that is the spoiler-free summary of books 1 and 2. If you don't want to know anything about Bones at the Crossroads, I would suggest clicking off the video now. And if you need a refresher, of course, you can watch my review of Blood at the Root, which I will be linking in my description. But without further ado, let's get on with the rest of the video. So now I will be going through all the concerns that I had from Blood at the Root and talking about whether or not I believe that they were properly addressed in Bones at the Crossroads. Starting off with my chief complaint being the representation of women. So the main concern I had with Blood at the Root was the portrayal of Malik's love interest, Alexis. When she is introduced, she is depicted as a strong, independent young woman. She is incredibly driven and passionate about her advocacy work, and she's a strong conjurer on top of that. But very quickly, as she and Malik rekindle their relationship, Alexis becomes a shell of her former self. Malik reduces her to a sex object, staking claim on a girl that he's not even in a formal relationship with. And while he is allowed to have wandering eyes, she can't so much as have a conversation with another man without getting accused of being a whore. There's one pivotal scene from Blood at the Root where Alexis is voicing her frustrations and not being able to do more for Black women. She wants to do more to help them, especially because she has these magical abilities. She specifically talks about violence towards Black women and how any crimes involving them do not get covered on the news. As she goes on this rant, she is being incredibly vulnerable. It's emotionally charged. It's raw the way she talks about her frustrations. But the only thing Malik hears out of this entire conversation is when she says, "Only Danye, aka his romantic rival, understands me." The only thing he says in response to this incredibly emotionally charged moment is, "Oh, so you and him are definitely f***ing."
But with our magic, we can prevent another Black woman or man from being murdered. She clocks me, shaking my head. I knew you wouldn't understand. The only person who understands me is Danye. Wow. So you and the nigga definitely fucking.
Again, this girl that he supposedly loves, he just ignored everything she said and only paid attention to her when she referenced another man. And then, when they eventually make up after this fight, Alexis still has to apologize to him when he slut-shamed her. And I could be misremembering, but I'm pretty sure she also agreed to cut ties with Danye. Again, someone who is her friend, because Malik is threatened by the presence of another man. I don't know, call me crazy, but something about that interaction doesn't scream that Malik respects women. I don't know. Anyway, in Bones at the Crossroads, we are introduced to Malik's new love interest, Dominique, aka Dom. When Dom was introduced in chapter 1 of this book, I was initially rolling my eyes. Keep in mind that for the majority of book 1, Malik was just gushing about how much he loved Alexis, how she was the love of his life, despite the fact that he only knew her for a couple of months when they were 7. So Malik is very in love with Alexis, keep that in mind. This book then opens with him making googly eyes and ogling Dominique. Mind you, this is like the first week of classes, maybe like the second. I think she was briefly mentioned in book 1, but either way, This is like our first proper introduction to her. And he's literally looking her up and down, talking about her tights, hugging her thighs in the right places. And my immediate thought when I'm reading this, I'm like, oh, so f*** Alexis, I guess. Maybe he wasn't as in love with her as he previously thought, as he led us as the readers to believe. Now, granted, I know that she betrayed him, but before we're introduced to Dominique, he's talking about how hurt he feels. He can't even say her name. And he's talking about how he still has these residual feelings. His love didn't just go away. He still has those residual feelings for her, but they disappear the minute he sees ass. But the moment my perspective changed was when Malik and Dom have their first romantic scene and they are about to kiss. In this moment, Malik and Dom are walking home from a party. They're under the moonlight. It's very romantic. They're talking a little bit about themselves, getting to know each other, and honestly, the conversation was kind of nice. She's talking about her home life, some of the things that she struggled with, and Malik is being vulnerable with her too. They are about to kiss when Malik suddenly remembers Alexis. In a dramatic twist, Malik not only acknowledges that he has complicated feelings for Alexis, but also that he doesn't want to hurt Dom by kissing her when he knows that he's not fully over Alexis. And he actually stops himself from kissing Dom. I wish you could have seen my real-time reaction to reading that. Leading up to this moment, I'm already aggravated with this man because I'm like, you spent the first book telling me you were in love with this girl and now you just forget her. Malik, I already didn't like you. Don't piss me off further. If there was ever a time for a man to not piss me off, it was when I was reading this book. But then I see him do this and I was like, my bad. I was wrong. Not only was Malik showing empathy, but he also acknowledged how his actions can negatively impact other people. And it was honestly this moment that caused the chain reaction that led me to make this video. Because up until this point, I still wasn't really on board with the book. It still seemed to be following a lot of the same patterns from book one, granted without as much of a heavy emphasis on some of the problematic parts. But this was one of the first moments where I realized, oh, this book isn't like Blood at the Root. We're making some changes here. And maybe I'm wrong. Not only are we making changes, but Malik is actually growing as a character. I was like, let me mind my business real quick and just read the book. I could not have been more excited at the possibility that I would be wrong. But it's not only this scene. The key thing about their relationship is that it's based on a genuine friendship. With Alexis, it was purely physical attraction and obsession. But with Dom, we see Malik have very genuine conversations with her, where he's talking about his past, his feelings, and he's being vulnerable with her. So yes, while Malik does have a physical attraction to Dom, he really starts to develop feelings for her when he gets to know her. The more he learns, the more he starts to fall in love with her. And it's a million times more believable than his romance with Alexis. So their romance is actually good. And I don't say that to be mean, but based on what I had from book one, seeing a genuinely healthy relationship seemed like it would never happen in this series. If you look at the relationship he had with Alexis and compare it to Dom, it's like night and day. Granted, it's not perfect, which I'll be going into later, but it's a significant improvement. So the romance is great, but what about Dom's portrayal as a woman? Well, it could use some work. There are a few moments where Dom has to be protected by Malik, and the only reason that I don't find that believable is because Dom is supposed to be a year older than him, and yet when they're confronted by the BATR, she has to be protected by Malik, who again, we have already established is new to Cayman University, has not received nearly the amount of proper formal training as Dom or any of the other people on campus. And yet somehow we have this girl who is again another powerful conjurer has to be shielded by Malik, the man. In a lot of the fight scenes she has, she doesn't really spring into action right away. Her initial instinct is to hide behind him, which again, chivalry, it's not bad, but again, these people both have magical abilities. There's no reason that Dom shouldn't be capable enough to take on enemies, especially because she's a year older than Malik and theoretically has more training than him. Both of them are a part of the secret NHS society known as the Divine Elam, so theoretically, Dom is a powerful conjurer on his level, and yet he constantly has to protect her. Guys, she's a human voodoo doll. She is OP as f***. You mean to tell me that he has to protect her? In general, it feels like in a lot of the fight scenes, she forgets that she has this ability until it becomes necessary. She's not portrayed as a powerful conjurer, but she's supposed to be. Honestly, the only powerful female conjurers in this book series are older women, that being Mama Aya and Tituba. We honestly don't get a lot of fight scenes that have young female conjurers in general, and if they are present, they're not really holding their own. I think the exception to this is Alexis, but again, in book 1, she's the villain. In book 2, a lot of the times we see female conjurers using their magic, it's for silly things, like just making things float, singing songs, or otherwise recording TikTok dance challenges. In general, I just think I would like to see more opportunities for the women to hold their own. I still find it hard to believe that Malik, someone who only has a couple months of formal training, is somehow better in combat and has more control over his abilities than other female conjurers his age, or other women that have objectively more experience than he does. Now, I don't think that this is necessarily done on purpose. I think that a lot of the times that Malik is protecting Dom is meant to be an example of him showing his affection for her. But I think it's just based in like chivalry and this idea that women need to be protected by men. And it gets called out a little bit because there's one scene where Malik and Dom have to practice fighting. Tituba sets them up with illusions of fake werewolf enemies and Malik defeats his pretty quickly, but Dom is struggling. And immediately Malik tries to go over to help her and Tituba stops him and is like, no, she has to be able to fight for herself. You can't always be there to protect her. And eventually Dom is able to defeat the werewolf. And I really like this scene, but I just wish that we kept the same energy throughout, where we saw Dom actually have more combat roles and we see her using her magic more effectively. But as the author promised, Malik is still flawed. So yeah, he does still default to some of these false pretenses of chivalry, but it actually gets a little more interesting than that. At some point in the book, Malik is nominated for homecoming court. He chooses Dom to run alongside him and be his queen. Eventually, Malik is confronted by Savon about his relationship with Dom. Savon tells Malik that it's not fair that he's leading her on and letting her carry the grunt work of their relationship. Essentially, he was forcing her to carry all the work of their campaign and schedule appearances and all that. He was just showing up and shaking hands and being a dude. And it's after this confrontation that not only Malik reflects on his actions, but he actually goes to therapy where he discovers that he was actually fully obsessed with Alexis and they essentially trauma bonded as children, which led to an incredibly unhealthy and toxic relationship. Again, validating everything I said in book 1. Society called me crazy for saying that he was being creepy, weird, and obsessed with Alexis, and then lo and behold, it got confirmed. It's canon! Anyway, Malik, after getting some space from Dom, has a genuine conversation with her where he acknowledges his flaws and admits that he has feelings for her, but that he wants to wait because he has unresolved feelings with Alexis. Oh my god. Transparency, honesty, vulnerability. I thought I would never find these traits in this man. Everything was looking up. I was so pleasantly surprised with the way his character was starting to grow and become this new person. And then Alexis shows up. So for the majority of this book, we never hear from Alexis. She's not on campus. Again, she got expelled. But eventually, Malik reunites with her. Initially, he's like, I hate you because you got my grandmother killed, you betrayed me, and you ruined my life, and he's really angry and upset with her. But then immediately after they have their little heart-to-heart, he kisses her, and they are about to have sex. The only thing that stops it is that they literally get ambushed. Now, he does tell Dom later on about the kiss, but I argue that he wasn't being fully honest because he doesn't tell her how close he was to having sex with Alexis. So, lying by omission. And she already is very heartbroken by this betrayal, but just imagine how worse it would have been if he was completely honest with her. Honestly, Dom is better than me. You know the crash out I would have if a man told me, sorry, I can't commit to you because I've got these complicated feelings and I do like you, but I just want to wait before we do anything like kissing. And then he immediately turns around after I risk my life to save him and kisses the girl that he said I had no reason to worry about her. Blood would be shed if that happened to me. But again, he's a flawed character. He did come clean somewhat to Dom, but the most important part is that he actually breaks it off with Alexis. He tells her about his growing relationship with Dom, and he says, you know what? This isn't good. This isn't healthy. I don't think we can continue. So yeah, he does have a moment where he has a lapse in judgment, but he eventually does the right thing by coming clean and breaking it off with Alexis, which does convey character growth. So overall, I would say that it's a definite improvement from Blood at the Root. Yes, again, Malik is not perfect. He's still going to therapy, he's still trying to work on himself, but he does have lapses in judgment. He does still make mistakes. But this time, he does have consequences. And after recognizing the things he's done wrong, he does everything in his power to make it right. Yes, he's not perfect, but we still see that he's very clearly working on himself. So overall, I was pretty happy with Malik's relationships with the other women in this book. Minus the one little fact that at some point in this book, Dom dies. Yeah, she gets killed by a werewolf creature. She eventually gets revived by Malik, but before that happens, he is looking at her corpse and tries to kiss her on the lips. Let's look at the direct quote, shall we? He says, "It's not meant to be anything strange, but I find myself hovering my lips just above hers." Again, she's dead. Like, if you feel the need to say that something isn't weird, maybe it is. Maybe it is strange for you to try to kiss a girl that has already died, shooting your shot post-mortem, also in the presence of another person. Yeah, Tituba is there when he tries to do this. So funny enough, actually, when I was looking back at Blood at the Root, I found a few other quotes on accident of Malik saying that he's acting creepy. At this point, I have to assume that this is just like a tonal problem. Like, I think the author is putting in this language of Malik acknowledging when he's acting creepy, and it's supposed to, like, I don't know, I guess be self-aware. In the example I'm about to show, Malik is looking at Alexis. She just got ready for a party. She looks beautiful, and he's admiring how beautiful she looks, which there's nothing inherently creepy about that. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's just the fact that he's saying it out loud, or at least like in his narration, that makes it uncomfortable. I'm going to insert clips from the audiobook so you can understand what I'm talking about. But this is what I think is like a fundamental issue. Because again, the things he's doing aren't inherently creepy, minus the almost kissing a corpse part. But a lot of the other stuff is not weird. It only becomes weird when he's like, oh, it takes everything in me not to be a creep. That's what takes it from, you know, just general admiration to obsession. Truly, I think it's just like a fundamental misunderstanding of how young men and women interact with each other. Because I assume that this isn't something that runs through the minds of young men. I at least would hope not. I'm sure there's like a general internal thought process of like, oh, I don't want to make a woman uncomfortable by my presence, which is fine. But it's different to like have that be present in your mind versus like actually doing stuff that is creepy. In these examples from Blood at the Root, I don't think it's weird. I think he makes it weird when he acknowledges it. But in that other one from Bones at the Crossroads, yeah, trying to kiss a corpse is weird. I'm so sorry. That is weird. Especially because, again, like, they're friends at this point. They're not, like, in a proper relationship. He has never made any advances at her up until this point. So I'm like, the fact that he would wait to do it until she's dead is kind of crazy. I would understand maybe, like, a kiss on the back of the hand or the forehead. Even the cheek would be kind of permissible. But, like, going all in on a kiss on the lips, that's insane. It's always so weird to read. Anyway, here are the examples.
When her full lips curl into that beautiful smile, it's making me clutch onto the art of being a gentleman for like 5 seconds. She keeps staring out, as if she's lost in thought. It takes everything in me not to be a creep, because I just stare at her.
But nobody's perfect, right? It couldn't have been all good. Now, moving on to the queer characters in this book. Now, we have 2 reoccurring queer characters in this book, that being Savon and D'Lo. D'Lo is Malik's roommate, and he identifies as bisexual. He is in a relationship with Savon, their mutual friend, who identifies as non-binary and uses they/them pronouns. Now, the issue I had with the representation of queer people in Blood at the Root was regarding some jokes that Malik would make. Now, there are 2 instances that stood out to me, one being when Malik finds out that Danye is sexually fluid, and the other is when Malik walks in and hears D'Lo having sex with another man.
Danye's, I start to ask, sexually fluid. Savon stops me from saying something whatever phobic that was gonna spill from my mouth. D'Lo grabs a bowl, a jug of oat milk, and a box of Fruity Pebbles from the top of the fridge, and eats that shit like He ain't just have a nigga come out his room. So, you an old dude? I ask, trying not to sound ignorant.
In these instances in book 1, the joke is that men are having sex with other men, and Malik is not used to that. And even in his internal monologue, he says that people have to cut him off so that he doesn't say something ignorant. In general, it's just a little odd. And this comes to a head in book 2. As I already mentioned, Cayman University is hosting a homecoming dance. The way that they nominate the homecoming court is essentially that the students will nominate men, and from there they will claim their queens. So this year, Malik's friend Savan wants to change the tradition and decides to run for homecoming court. They mentioned that in the past they weren't allowed to run for homecoming court because the campus is very queerphobic. And one of the reoccurring thoughts about this whole homecoming court situation is that just because their community is magical doesn't mean that they're not flawed. And at this point, Malik is very accepting of Savan and Dilo, but he's more so accepting because they're his friends. And this conflict arises when Savan and Dilo are nominated for the court alongside Malik and Dom. The backlash with Savan's nomination is almost immediate. Fellow students on campus tell Malik that they're going to vote for him just so that they don't vote for Savan. And the only reason that he's getting their votes is because he's a straight cis man. Tensions on campus come to a head on Halloween night when they're having a party. Malik is interviewed about his campaign, and they specifically ask him about what he thinks about Savan running, and in general, how he views the queerphobia that is taking place on the campus. And Malik claims that he has it just as hard as Savan. Almost immediately, Savan rightfully calls out Malik about his privilege. For the majority of the book, Savan has expressed how much they want to run for homecoming court. They have all these dreams and goals, and the reason that they want to be nominated so badly is so that they can change the culture at Cayman University. Essentially, they want to pave the way for future queer folk that come to campus. But Malik doesn't care about any of that stuff. He didn't want to run. He didn't want to be nominated for the homecoming court. So he's running even though he doesn't want to, and he's forcing Dom to carry all the burden of their campaign. Savan tells Malik that people are only voting for him because they're queer-phobic and don't want to vote for Savan. And initially, Malik fails to recognize his own privilege, which I think is actually a beautiful commentary, because oftentimes when you talk to someone that does belong to a marginalized community, they can fail to see the ways that they do have privilege. And I particularly like this moment because it's not necessarily said super explicitly. This is something that is allowed to remain in the subtext, something that is subtle but easy to pick up on if you're looking for it, which honestly I was really impressed with, because yeah, Malik is incredibly privileged in this situation. And yes, his thinking is entirely flawed. He claims to care about his friends, but he doesn't realize the ways that he's hurting them. There's a moment where Savan is physically attacked, punched in the face for being queer. And when they're called into the chancellor's office and they're reprimanding Savan, Malik doesn't say anything to defend them. But again, once he is called out and isolated from his friends, aka facing consequences, is when he starts to change. After he goes to therapy, that is like the best part in this book, seeing Malik talk to a therapist. He goes to talk to Savan and apologizes for his actions. He acknowledges how he was wrong. He acknowledges how he hurt them and tries to come up with a solution. Malik offers to drop out of the race for homecoming king. Now, this was initially what I was hoping wouldn't happen in this book, but it is beautifully remedied by Savan, because Savan gets Malik to stay in the race because they want to win fair and square. They essentially don't want Malik to give them pity votes, and they want to achieve this win all on their own, which I think is a beautiful way to acknowledge that Malik is trying to make the situation better and take responsibility for his actions, while also still not taking away power from Savan. Honestly, the execution of this storyline is one of my favorites in the book. I just think that there's so many layers to it. Malik is unknowingly queerphobic despite having queer friends. He experiences cognitive dissonance by seeing the injustice and still benefiting from it, even after going to therapy and acknowledging the things that he did wrong. Him trying to solve the problem is still misguided. He doesn't suddenly become this perfect ally overnight. And then just the scene of him being confronted with his privilege in real time and seeing the initial pushback before he eventually comes to accept it and learn to be a better person as a result. Honestly, I think I would have rated this book 5 stars. I know, crazy. If it only had the homecoming court plot line. I think it could have very well stood on its own. That's how well thought out it was. And as I mentioned already, it's a drastic improvement from Blood at the Root. Whereas Malik still had instances of being ignorant, this time he's facing consequences for it. And it's when he's confronted that he then has the ability to grow and learn from his mistakes. And as I already mentioned, he's still not perfect. But once you finish the book, you see that he's still at a point where he wants to learn and he wants to be better. Now, I've been singing my praises for the majority of this video, and now I want to focus on the man of the hour, that is Malik. In general, Malik is completely different than he was in Blood at the Root. And as I've said multiple times already, the biggest difference is that he's facing consequences. Other than the consequences with Dom and Siobhan, another big moment that transforms his character is one instance with his foster brother, Tay. At this point in the story, we are introduced to a new character. His name is John Henry. Honestly, I will say the plotline with him is kind of forgettable just because he's not super present in the book. The only time we really hear from him is when Malik goes to Mama Aya's house. And again, because of the length, it was easy for me to forget that he existed, but that's neither here nor there. Just know that there's a character named John Henry, and he is the brother of Mama Aya, and he is coming to stay at her house. Now, him showing up causes friction with Malik. Throughout book 1 and 2, Malik has been struggling with regulating his emotions. It becomes worse with the death of Mama Aya and his mom coming back, and there is a moment where all his stress accumulates until it eventually blows up. He gets into a fight with John Henry, and his younger brother Tay gets caught in the crossfire. In a moment of pure rage, Malik hits Tay and sent him flying across the field. They describe the moment with Tay's body being flung across this field. He hits a tree and his body turns black and blue from the impact. And it's this moment that completely breaks down their relationship. The one rule that Malik made with himself from book 1 was that he would never use magic to hurt his brother. And even though he didn't do it intentionally, their trust is broken. Thankfully, Tay is healed and he doesn't have any major injuries from this moment, but Tay doesn't want to see Malik anymore, and it's this moment that triggers him to go see a therapist. His initial reaction is to beg Tay for forgiveness. He's constantly sending him texts, trying to check up on him and apologize, but he doesn't receive anything back. And it's with therapy that he realizes that the only reason he wants forgiveness is because he doesn't want to feel bad anymore. He wants to feel better about himself, and he wants things to go back to the way they used to be. It's very subtle, but it's a clear mirroring of Malik's relationship with Tay and his relationship with his mother, where Malik did have some positive moments with his mother. We saw her be kind and caring to him, and yet at the same time, we know that she's abusive. She had moments of anger and rage that was directed at Malik, but she would try to apologize for it. She would try to make up for it and try to win back his forgiveness. And we see the same thing happening between Malik and Tay, where instead of truly acknowledging what he did wrong, he's just trying to move past it, trying to get Tay to forgive him so they can just go on with the rest of their lives. He doesn't acknowledge the true breakdown of trust that happened as a result of Malik using his magic against him. So we see Malik fall into the very same cycle of his mother. But with Malik, he's taking the right steps to be different. As a result, he becomes more empathetic, understanding, and overall mature. And it's through Malik working on himself, going to therapy, being able to identify and regulate his emotions, that he's actually able to experience joy. He allows himself to feel happiness and enjoy the company of people around him, which honestly just makes those scenes all the more gratifying. You know how hard he's worked to get there, all the things he's done to be able to be in the moment with his friends. We've gone on this character arc. We know what he's doing to be better. And we know that his journey isn't ending with just going to therapy. It'll be a constant struggle to regulate his emotions, to be a better person. But it's a journey that he's willing to take. He still has so much room to grow. And honestly, yeah, I like him now. Now, with all that beautiful growth out of the way, I do have to address the one other thing I did not like about Blood at the Root, and that is the world building and plot. Now, already this book has made leaps and bounds compared to Blood at the Root, but of course, not everything can be perfect. Part of the issue is that some of my concerns from book 1 can't just be magically fixed. The foundational flaws at this point are just getting built over. We never get a clear understanding of the separation between the non-magic and magical worlds. We never learn who gets to have magic and who doesn't, because Malik obviously came from a family of conjurers, but his roommate Dilo, his parents didn't have magic. So how is it that magic shows up in people? Like, is it passed down from families? Is it random? And the other big thing that never gets answered is what would happen if the magical world was exposed. Because funny enough, there's a scene in Bones at the Crossroads where Malik is using magic in a public space and he's in a fight with the BATR and he's like, oh my god, they're about to expose us to the human world. And I got annoyed because I was like, you were just throwing out hexes not 2 minutes ago. You had no concern about people finding out about magic, but now it's an issue? We also don't find out how the conjurers find out about Cayman University. Like, Dilo's parents aren't magical. Who told him about Cayman? Did he get a magical letter at age 11 like in Harry Potter? Overall, to sum up the issue, the world of Cayman University, of conjurers and whatnot, is just too big and therefore too vague. In an attempt to incorporate so many subsets of magic and so many cultural backgrounds, there is no main branch of magic for us to base our knowledge off of. For example, spells in this world can be cast in one of many ways. Spells are cast in Creole, Swahili, Latin, Spanish, Bible verses, or no words at all. We never learn if certain languages can cast certain spells. If like there's one spell and it just gets translated across multiple languages. Like if theoretically the spell could do the same thing even if you say it in a different language. Or if each language has its own specialty of magic. I'm just very confused. There's also different kinds of magic. We learn about Bane, which is like bad magic, and Kave, which Kave is unique to Malik. And at first, I was looking back at my notes from book 1 and I thought Kave was just like general magic that everyone has. No, only Malik's family has that. And what it does, I don't really know. And my question still is, what is like the general magic that everyone has if it's not Kave or Bane? Like, is there a name for it? The magic is also used so broadly and so often. The best way I could describe the use of magic in this book is that it's very camp. Everything is just perpetually floating. Gravity does not exist at Cayman University. I also feel that there could be more creativity and imagination when it comes to the magic, because the 3 main uses of magic I see in this book are either super speed, teleporting, or mood ring. Yeah, 3 different times in this book we see magic used as a mood ring. First, it's Malik has these little magical headphones that are able to detect your mood to create a playlist for you, which I was like, cool, that's fine. And then in the same chapter, we get someone using magic to create a hat that can detect your mood and it changes colors based on that. And then we have Dom, who is able to use magic to detect your mood and find your little heart song or whatever. And besides that, the main form of transportation at Cayman University is either super speed or teleportation. And honestly, just the term super speed feels more like superhero-y to me. In my mind, everyone on this campus is constantly walking around at the Vampire Diaries speed. Like they're just zooming back and forth. And there's multiple times where they're using magic for this purpose, and it just feels really unnecessary. There's even a moment where Malik is reading a recipe from his phone and he uses magic to, direct quote, copy and paste it into the air. In that moment, I'm like, was it so hard to like zoom in on your phone? Why could we not read it? You already had it in front of you. There truly is just no rhyme or reason when it comes to the use of magic in this book. I'm also not a fan of the way that the plot is driven in this story. On one hand, you have the homecoming plot, as I already said, but then you have like the actual lore part of it, which is like the BATR, his mom, and all that evil stuff going on. And anything related to that comes in the forms of like dreams and visions. Essentially, any time that plotline needs to get progressed, Malik will just have a dream or some kind of vision that will allude to something happening. Oh, Malik had a dream that his mom is trying to find a way to infiltrate the campus. Or, oh, he got a vision of this weird woman that is summoning creatures. The way it's spaced out in the story is just like a little random. but it also just doesn't have a lot of intervention on Malik's part. Like, essentially all the clues and everything you need to know about that storyline is just kind of like fed to him. I think I would have been more engaged if there was more detective work, for lack of a better term. Like if Malik was actively trying to find out, oh, what happened to his mom? How is she trying to get on the campus? How do I defeat the BATR? Stuff like that. Essentially, a lot of the important information that Malik needs to know is just like given to him, which again just takes away a lot of the power from the characters, where it's like things are just happening to him versus him actively taking a role in the progression of the plot. And on that note, Malik just gets more and more OP as the book series goes on. It was already bad enough where in book 1, the entire premise of that book is that Malik needs to go to Cayman University so he can learn to use his magic. And yet, in the same book, he is bodying professors and ancient beings with no problem. Like in that case, he has no reason to be at Cayman. He already knows how to use magic. He's fine. But then it gets worse, because in this book, Malik has like all the powers. Malik has his normal magic, Kave magic, and he also has the abilities of the Scroll of Idan, which I really couldn't tell you what it does, but it's like this uber powerful thing that everyone is after in this book. And then it gets worse because there's a scene where Malik essentially has this grand escape because he's on trial because people think he killed his fellow students, which he didn't, mind you. And he manages to pull off this escape, fighting off an entire tribe of conjurers. Again, he is supposed to be new to this. He is supposed to be fairly inexperienced and untrained. He is going up against people that have been conjurers for a very long time. These are adults. Even if he was the chosen one and had like immense power just naturally, he would still need time to learn spells, which he doesn't have. He's only been there for like a couple months. I'm gonna say, conservatively, probably like 6 months. 6 months is nothing against years of experience. There's a moment when he's fighting off people and he gets a spear to the chest. Rue from the Hunger Games style, like he's dead. And somehow he manages to pull that shit out and heal himself instantly. That's a lethal wound, and he lived because of magic? Mind you, Tituba, one of the most ancient conjurers in this series, one of the most powerful conjurers, could not save Dom when she was poisoned. You're telling me Malik is powerful enough to heal himself? On the topic of Dom, the only reason that she lives is because Malik uses the Scroll of Idan to bring her back to life. This was the one main thing I hated about this book, because for all my talk about Malik having to face the consequences of his actions and how that made the book so much stronger, this was the one instance where he didn't have to face any consequences. He brought this girl back from the dead. She died. And he gets yelled at by Baron Samedi because he's like, you have upset the natural balance of the world. She was supposed to die, and now she's alive. And he's like, the only way we can fix this is if someone dies in her place. And Malik's like, oh no, I can't kill another person. Why does someone have to die so that Dom can live? And it's a whole crisis for all of 2 seconds, because then Baron Samedi's like, never mind. No one has to die. You just have to give me offerings. But then at the end of the book, it goes to shit anyway, because Malik has to sacrifice himself in order for everything to go back to normal and Dom can live. That just pissed me off, because why would you even try to say that, oh, the only way to fix it is if someone else dies, and then immediately backtrack and say, no, never mind, just give me offerings. Like, the stakes of having someone be brought back to life and therefore having an imbalance in the world is beautiful. I think it makes the story interesting. I think it would have been so much more impactful if we just carried out the threat. In general, I just think I was a little lost. There's a lot going on. We have a lot of antagonists. Antagonists include his mom, the BATR, Kumale, who was in book 1. Marinette, honestly could not tell you exactly who she is, other than she created these werewolf creatures that I constantly got confused with Labubu. I think they're called Lagoo, and I just heard Labubu perpetually. Part of the reason I was so confused is, again, I just never understood a lot of these people's motivations from the first book. So in the second book, it just further never got cleared up for me. Now, the last two things I want to talk about this book before I give my overall thoughts is the language and the audiobook. I know a lot of people complained about the language in book one, and I think my main issue with the overall language of this series is the overuse of pop culture references. There's so many instances where these references are used to help paint a picture when we've already been given a description by the characters. For example, there's one instance where Malik is describing these little sprite creatures. He talks about the way that they're moving in the space, the little metallic details, the tips of their wings, and it paints a beautiful picture. But he then concludes his description by saying that they look straight out of a Disney movie. And in this case, I think it weakens the description because you essentially did all that work just to replace the image with Tinkerbell. I think it would have been more impactful if we just let that description speak for itself versus using a pop culture reference to further add on to it. A lot of the times it just feels redundant and it's kind of like a fourth wall break and it just breaks the flow of the story. I think a lot of these descriptions work well on their own, so just reinforcing with pop culture references is overkill. It dates the story, and especially in a time where the internet moves so fast, things go out of style incredibly quickly. By the time the book is published, a lot of the phrases that are being used have gone way out of date. Plus, using the phrase "Mercury is retrograding the hell out of me" is criminal. In general, I find that the language is a little repetitive. Whenever teachers are referenced in the book, it's always something along the lines of, "Mr. So-and-so doesn't play," or "Mrs. So-and-so is no joke." It gets very old very quickly. I'm just like, are all these teachers a hard ass? Like the first time, it's funny, a joke, whatever. But saying it with every single teacher gets old. As a fun little caveat, there's a point in the story where Malik says, "I can't even lie, I got the bubble guts," and he's talking about when he's getting ready for this homecoming dance. And I need an outsider perspective. When I hear the term bubble guts, to me, that sounds like somebody's got shit. I've never heard bubble guts being used in reference to someone feeling nervous. Do people use it for that? Am I misusing bubble guts? Let me know. Let me know in the comments, because that confused the hell out of me. To finish on a lighter note, I did want to bring up the audiobook since, as most of you know, that's how I consume a lot of books. And in this case, I was not a fan. Now, this started in Blood at the Root, where that audiobook made use of sound effects. Anytime people were using magic, they would include some kind of like magical sound to go with it. But for some reason, I don't remember it being nearly as excessive as it is in this audiobook production. It's used so frequently because people are using magic. They're on a magical HBCU campus. I expect them to be casting spells. I feel like in Blood at the Root, it wasn't used every time they use magic, but in this book, it is. And very quickly, I was getting annoyed. I got fed up. Using it a couple times, okay, fine. But eventually, it just like threw me off every time I would try to listen. Because when I read a book, when I listen to an audiobook, I paint a picture in my mind. I have an idea of the space, what the characters look like, their body movements, and just in general, how they're taking up the space. And I have an idea for how they sound and the sound effects and stuff like that. So when this audiobook inserts sound effects, it takes that power away from my imagination. And it was especially annoying when I disagreed with the specific choice of sound effect. Like some of the sounds they were using were literal laser beams. I thought I was accidentally listening to Star Wars while I had the audiobook playing. Or there were times where it would have like a horror movie kind of build up where you hear like the tension building, and I would get nervous because I'm like, oh my God, the evil person is about to jump out or something's about to happen, and then it would just go away. So I would get all nervous for nothing. I think overall the timing choices weren't always great. Sometimes I honestly thought the TARDIS was making an appearance. The sound effects were interesting. I think some books can use them effectively. In this instance, it was complete overkill. Finally, overall, these are my final thoughts on Blood at the Root and Bones at the Crossroads. I want to acknowledge that I stand by what I said in my review of Blood at the Root. My concerns and critiques based on the content I had at the time were valid. After reading Blood at the Root, I was afraid that in an effort to make a book for Black boys, we did not challenge them, and instead we appealed to what the patriarchy expects of young boys. The be a man rhetoric, the misogyny, the queerphobia. I didn't feel that these norms were challenged, but in this book, I did. All the changes that I wanted to see were made for the most part. And part of that comes from the experience that was gained after the first book was published. Is it perfect? No. Is this automatically my new favorite series? No. But there's a difference between not liking a book because it's not your style and not liking a book because it's problematic. There are plenty of books that I don't like that you guys never hear about because sometimes it's simply not my vibe. I simply just don't like the story. It's not always, oh, this book is problematic, or this book is racist, or it's misogynistic, or whatever. Sometimes it's simply not my taste. I make these kinds of videos, what people call rant reviews, not because I'm a hater and I like to complain, but because I want to see change. I don't demand perfection from every single book I read, but I do demand that there is a basic respect for the real people that are depicted in the pages of a book. And again, while I don't love this book, while I still have issues with the language, the plot, the world building, I at least feel better knowing that all the moral issues I had with this book were addressed. Whereas before, I would say, I don't like the series because it's problematic, misogynistic, queerphobic, etc. I can now say that it's just not my taste. Overall, I would give this book a 3 out of 5. Again, personally, it's just my hangups with the world building and plot, but otherwise, I think it was pretty engaging. My favorite part of this book by far is the storyline with the homecoming court and his character arc. I think that there has been such significant improvement with this book that it would be a disservice if I didn't acknowledge it. And while again, I don't think I was wrong to make my first video, I now have more context and my feelings for the overall series have changed. But yeah, with that being said, that's the end of the video. I have been talking for a few hours now, I think at least 3 by this point. Initially, I was on the fence about making this video, but after I felt positively about the changes, I was like, I have to. And again, I think this is the true purpose of making reviews. Like, the best part of being a part of the bookish community is being able to take into account other people's perspectives. Not necessarily having one idea be set in stone, but being able to develop your own opinions based on what other people are saying and just to have a conversation. As a community, we need to accept that it's okay for people to change their minds. Like the day we're able to have a critical analysis of literature and people just have a conversation versus labeling someone as a hater is the day that we heal. But anyway, yes, that's my final thoughts on Bones at the Crossroads. Let me know in the comments. Do you agree, disagree? Have you read the book? Have you watched my review of the first book? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Now you can also follow me on all my social media at Listen to Kristen on TikTok, Instagram, and BlueSky. And if you haven't heard, I am actually coming out with my own debut series, which is called The Magical Morrisons. Be sure to add these books to your lists on Goodreads, and no pressure, but you can also check out the links in my description to pre-order the books now. Anyway, yeah, that's the end of my video. I will see you in the next one. Hopefully the internet is ready to receive this review that I have spent the past 4 hours crafting. I'm excited to hear everyone's thoughts, but kind of scared. Hoping for the best. Thank you.